When we picture a startup, there is this incredibly persistent Hollywood myth that just immediately pops into our heads.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's always like two brilliant college kids in a messy dorm room,
Right. They have this one lightning bolt idea, they scribble some code on a whiteboard, and boom, they strike it rich, buy the sports cars, and the rest is history.
which, I mean, makes for a really fun movie, but it suggests that if you just have the right genes and the perfect idea, success is somehow automatic.
Like it's preordained or something.
Exactly. It creates this illusion that building a new business is mostly about magic and destiny rather than, actual work.
And if you step into the real world and innovation, that cinematic version completely falls apart. It's actually a pretty dangerous illusion.
It really is.
So today, for our deep dive, we are tearing down that dorm room myth using the exact blueprint from Eric Ries's lean startup methodology.
A fantastic framework.
It really is. Okay, let's unpack this. If a startup isn't just two kids in a garage, what actually is it? Because the source material we're looking at gives a definition that totally surprised me.
Yeah, the definition is intentionally broad, but um, highly specific in its conditions. The methodology defines a startup as an institution designed to create a new product or service under conditions of extreme uncertainty,
Extreme uncertainty, meaning nobody actually knows if the thing is even going to work.
or if anyone even wants it. And notice what isn't in that definition.
Yeah, it doesn't say anything about the size of the company.
Exactly. It doesn't restrict a startup by size, the industry, or whether the founders are eating ramen noodles. It is entirely about operating in the fog of the unknown.
Wow. Okay.
To illustrate this, the text highlights a manager named Mark. So Mark works at a massive legacy Fortune 500 company.
Okay, so a huge corporation.
Huge. He's a veteran executive. He knows all the internal corporate politics. And he's been tasked with leading a division to build a completely new web-based product to modernize this mammoth company.
So on paper, Mark is like the absolute furthest thing from a kid in a dorm room. I mean, he has resources, a secure salary, a whole HR department.
He does. But according to this framework, Mark is fundamentally an entrepreneur.
Really? Even in a Fortune 500 company?
Yes, because he is running a startup inside a corporate giant. He's trying to build something unprecedented under conditions of extreme uncertainty.
Because he doesn't know what the customer wants yet.
Right. The market hasn't validated the product, and he has no idea if the initiative will succeed. What Mark lacks isn't a massive budget or talented engineers.
What does he lack then?
What he lacks is a reliable process, a way to turn the raw, chaotic materials of innovation into tangible success.
And that lack of process is where traditional business thinking completely derails, doesn't it? I mean, think about how traditional management works.
Oh, it's all about planning.
Exactly. It relies on making these grand, meticulously detailed plans. You do like a year of market research, you build an 18-month product roadmap, you project your revenues for the next 4 years in a massive spreadsheet.
Which is a methodology built for a stable environment.
Right.
Planning and forecasting are tools that only work when you have a long operating history. I mean, if you are manufacturing toothpaste, you know the market size, you know the distribution channels.
You can actually forecast that.
Exactly. But startups have none of those structural advantages.
Reading through this, I kept visualizing the difference between launching a space rocket and driving a car.
Oh, that's a great analogy from the text.
Yeah, because when you launch a space rocket, everything has to be meticulously planned. Every millisecond of the thrust, every booster separation, the exact trajectory, it's all pre-programmed.
And if you make a tiny mathematical error at launch,
The result is fatal, like thousands of miles down the line. It feels like too many businesses write these 50-page business plans acting like they are launching rockets. They just assume that if they execute the plan flawlessly, they'll hit the moon.
and that assumption is incredibly dangerous when you haven't even proven the moon exists yet.
Huh. Exactly my thought. It makes so much more sense to run a new venture like you're driving a car.
Right, because you have a vision of your destination.
Yes, but you don't sit in your driveway and pre-program every exact movement of the steering wheel. You get in, you start moving, and you steer continuously based on real-time feedback.
You adjust to the road.
Exactly. If there's a detour, you turn. If a dog runs into the road, you hit the brakes. You are constantly absorbing information and course correcting.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of the text, what we're really talking about is a new discipline of management.
Which sounds like an oxymoron for startups.
It does, right? People often assume management is boring, rigid, and strictly for big corporations, while startups are supposed to be chaotic and free-flowing.
And exciting.
Yeah. But relying on pure chaos wastes enormous amounts of human time, passion, and capital building things nobody actually wants. The destination, the big vision, stays the same, but steering the car requires a highly structured, rigorous method to navigate that fog.
I'm struggling with this a bit, though.
Okay, how so?
Well, if traditional rigid planning is thrown out the window because it's too inflexible, why not just adopt the just do it approach?
Ah, the classic Silicon Valley mindset.
Right. Isn't that what we hear all the time? Move fast and break things. Just build a product, launch it, and let the market tell us if it's good.
The just do it approach is tempting because it feels like action. It feels like progress.
Yeah, you're building stuff.
But the sources are incredibly clear on this. It is a massive trap. Releasing a product wildly just to see what happens guarantees you will, in fact, see what happens.
Right.
But it absolutely does not guarantee that you will learn anything useful from the outcome. If you don't have a structured hypothesis before you launch, the results will just be a chaotic mess of data.
So if it fails, you won't know why.
Exactly. And worse, if it succeeds, you won't know how to replicate it.
Man, so you just end up driving the car in circles in the parking lot thinking you're getting somewhere just because the engine is running.
That's a great way to put it. So instead of chaos, the framework introduces a concept called validated learning.
Validated learning.
Okay. This replaces the traditional metrics of progress. In a standard factory, progress is measured by how many physical widgets you manufacture. But in a startup, progress is measured by how much validated learning you acquire about your customers.
So it's about learning, not just producing.
It is, at its core, a scientific method applied to business.
So you aren't just trying to make a quick buck or build a cool feature. You are running empirical experiments to test your assumptions.
And that word empirical is vital here. Validated learning isn't some post-mortem excuse you use to cover up a failure.
Right, like, well, the product tanked, but hey, we learned a lot.
Exactly. It's not sitting in a boardroom saying that after losing $2 million. It is a rigorous process of demonstrating with hard data that your team has discovered valuable truths about the market.
Okay, that makes sense.
You formulate a hypothesis about what customers want, you test it, and you measure the actual behavior. Not just what they say they want, but what they actually do.
Okay, so to run these scientific experiments, the startup needs a laboratory mechanism. And the text calls this the build, measure, learn feedback loop.
Yes.
This is essentially the steering wheel of the car.
It is the absolute heartbeat of the methodology. Every startup's fundamental activity is to turn ideas into products, measure how customers respond, and then learn whether to pivot or persevere.
And speed is important here, right?
Crucial. The entire goal of any startup is to minimize the total time it takes to get through this exact loop. You do not want to spend 2 years in the build phase, hidden in a basement, before you ever reach the measure phase.
Because by the time you come out of the basement, the market might have completely changed. Or you realize you built the wrong thing entirely.
Exactly.
So you start with a hypothesis. You identify the most critical thing you need to learn. And here's where it gets really interesting. The fastest way to get through that build phase is by creating what the methodology calls a minimum viable product, or an MVP.
The famous MVP.
Yeah. But putting out a bare minimum product sounds terrifying. I mean, we are all conditioned to be perfectionists, right?
Absolutely.
We want our product to be beautiful, flawless, and ready for a glossy magazine spread. Who wants to put their name on something half-baked?
It goes against every instinct a professional has. But the text provides a paradigm-shifting rule to counter that fear. It says, if we do not know who the customer is, we do not know what quality is.
Wow, that is profound.
It really shifts your perspective.
So if you spend 6 months polishing a feature that the customer ultimately doesn't even want, all that polishing was pure waste.
Exactly the point. The MVP isn't about building a cheap, buggy product just to be lazy.
Right.
It's about building the fastest possible version of your product that allows you to run a full build, measure, learn loop with real customers. It's about maximizing learning, not maximizing features.
The examples of this data sources really drive home how beautifully crappy an MVP can be. Like, take Dropbox.
Oh, such a classic example.
Today, it's a massive file-sharing giant, deeply integrated into our operating systems. But early on, the CEO, Drew Houston, faced a massive technical hurdle.
Building that syncing tech was no joke.
Exactly. Building a fully functioning, seamless file syncing infrastructure that worked across Windows, Mac, and Linux was incredibly difficult and would take immense engineering time.
Under traditional management thinking, he would have locked his engineering team away for 3 years, burned through millions of dollars of venture capital, and built the perfect infrastructure.
Before ever showing it to a single potential user.
Right.
But his core hypothesis wasn't, can I build this? His core hypothesis was, if I build this, will people actually want to use it?
Yeah, a crucial distinction.
So his MVP wasn't a software program at all. It was just a video.
Literally just a video.
Literally, a simple, low-budget video showing how the software would work once it was built. He narrated it, dropped in a few inside jokes for the tech community, posted it on a forum, and just tracked the signups for the beta waiting list.
He built a simulation of the experience to test demand.
And that video drove hundreds of thousands of signups overnight. That was his empirical, validated learning.
It's a brilliant strategy to completely bypass the waste of over-engineering. He proved the demand before he built the supply.
So smart.
Another fascinating MVP example from the text is a company called Aardvark.
Oh, the Wizard of Oz MVP. This one is wild.
It really is. It highlights the mechanics of testing a concept perfectly. So the founders, Max and Damon, wanted to build an artificial intelligence platform.
Okay.
The idea was that you could ask a subjective question like, what's a good restaurant in this specific neighborhood for a first date? And the AI would instantly route your question to the perfect person in your social network who had the expertise to answer it.
Building a highly complex natural language processing AI routing algorithm sounds like an absolute nightmare.
It would have taken years, so instead of writing that algorithm, they created a simple front-end interface for users. And behind the scenes, there was zero artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
None. It was just Max, Damon, and their team sitting at their computers, physically reading the incoming questions, frantically searching the user's social networks, and manually routing the questions to the right people.
So they were literally the men behind the curtain pulling the levers, like the Wizard of Oz.
Exactly. To the user, the product looked fully functional and magical. But the founders were doing things that were totally laughably unscalable.
But scalability wasn't the hypothesis they were testing, was it?
No, it wasn't. They were testing whether the core value proposition actually mattered to people. Would users actually ask questions? Would the recipients actually answer them?
And by faking the AI, they proved the behavioral demand was there.
Exactly. Once they had that validated learning, they raised the capital, built the real algorithmic tech, and eventually sold the company to Google for $50 million.
Which just proves that agonizing over perfectionism upfront is actively hurting your innovation.
Without a doubt.
There's another method mentioned called the concierge MVP, demonstrated by a company called Food on the Table. Their premise was to create weekly meal plans and grocery lists based on what was specifically on sale at a user's local grocery store. But the CEO didn't start by building a massive nationwide database of every grocery store's inventory.
He started with the most micro-scale test possible.
Right. He found one single customer in Austin, Texas. He personally went to her house, reviewed the local grocery store circulars, and handcrafted a meal plan and shopping list for her.
He acted as her personal concierge.
Exactly. He physically collected her feedback, tweaked the recipes, and learned exactly what she valued. He manually tested the entire growth model before writing a single line of scaling code.
What links Dropbox, Aardvark, and Food on the Table is that the founders actively resisted the urge to hide in the build phase.
They didn't retreat to a whiteboard.
Right. They got out of the building and confronted reality. But this brings us to a critical tension in the methodology.
What's that?
Well, once you launch your MVP, however scrappy it is, and you start getting feedback, how do you measure success? Because the human brain is highly susceptible to data that flatters us.
Oh, we absolutely are. We love a graph that goes up and to the right. It feels like validation.
We do. But those numbers often lie. What's fascinating here is that the text draws a hard line between vanity metrics and innovation accounting.
Vanity metrics?
Yeah, vanity metrics are gross, cumulative numbers, like total registered users, total app downloads, or total page views.
The numbers that look incredible on a chart.
Exactly, and they make everyone in a boardroom feel secure. But they are incredibly dangerous because they give a false sense of progress. I mean, a cumulative chart of total users will always go up, even if your business is bleeding cash.
Because you never subtract from a cumulative total.
Right. Vanity metrics don't tell you if your actual engine of growth is working.
So what replaces them?
Innovation accounting. This relies on actionable metrics to see if the changes you are making to the product are actually improving the business model. This usually involves tools like A/B testing or cohort analysis.
Okay, let's break down those mechanics. Because the text uses the story of a founder named David who started a company called Vodazin, and it perfectly illustrates how dangerous vanity metrics are.
Is a great cautionary tale.
So Vodazin was a social network designed to verify registered voters and get them to take political action. David builds his MVP. It costs him $1,200 and takes 3 months.
Very lean.
Very lean. He launches it, but the initial metrics are pretty bleak. Only 5% of visitors actually register for the site, and of those, only 17% activate and verify their voter status.
So David enters the learn phase. He does what any good entrepreneur does. He tries to optimize the product. He spends 2 more months and another $5,000 tweaking the design, improving the messaging, and running A/B tests.
And for anyone unfamiliar, A/B testing is where you literally show version A of your website to half your visitors and version B to the other half, just to see which one gets more clicks or signups.
Precisely. It's a very tactical way to optimize the site. And through this optimization, David's vanity metrics respond beautifully.
They went up.
Big time.
Yeah.
His registration rate jumps from 5% up to 17%, and that activation rate, it skyrockets from 17% all the way to a massive 90%.
Wow. In a traditional corporate environment, David is a genius. The graphs are pointing to the moon.
But the actionable metrics, the innovation accounting, revealed a brutal underlying truth.
Uh-oh.
Instead of looking at cumulative totals, David used a cohort analysis.
What does that mean exactly?
Instead of looking at total users over time, a cohort analysis isolates just the specific group of people, the cohort who signed up this week, and it tracks if they're actually coming back the next week and the next.
Oh, I see.
It shows you the actual human behavioral trend, not just a cumulative high score.
And when David looked at customer retention through that cohort analysis, meaning the people who actually kept using the platform and finding long-term value in it, the numbers were disastrous.
They really were.
Before all his optimization, retention was at 5%. After all that time, money, and A/B testing, it only moved up to 8%.
Which is a fatal flaw in the business model.
Explain the mechanics of why that is fatal. I mean, if 90% of people are activating, why does an 8% retention rate bankrupt the company?
Because if 92% of the people who try your product never come back, you are basically pouring water into a bucket with a massive hole in the bottom. It doesn't matter if millions of people try it once. The marketing cost to acquire those new users will drain your bank account long before you ever turn a profit from the tiny 8% who stay.
The engine of growth is fundamentally broken.
Exactly.
Yeah.
David had built a highly optimized, frictionless funnel, leading to a product that people fundamentally did not want to stick around for.
Man. So innovation accounting stripped away all of David's delusions.
It forced him to confront the fact that his foundational hypothesis was flawed.
And when a startup hits that wall, when the actionable metrics prove that no amount of superficial tweaking is going to fix the core engine, they arrive at the most painful and crucial decision in the entire lean startup methodology.
They have to make the choice: pivot or persevere.
So what does this all mean? A pivot is a word that gets thrown around a lot. People usually think a pivot just means giving up, firing everyone, throwing the code in the trash, and starting a completely new business.
That is a common misconception, but a true pivot is much more strategic.
How so?
A pivot is a structured course correction. It's designed to test a new, fundamental hypothesis about the product, the strategy, or the engine of growth, while keeping one foot firmly rooted in the validated learning you have already acquired.
So you don't throw away the learning, you keep one foot on the ground, and you shift your other foot to a new angle.
That's a great visual.
Going back to David at Vodazin, he had the courage to pivot instead of just burning through his remaining cash trying to force a bad idea to work.
He did.
He executed what the text calls a customer segment pivot. He realized through his data that everyday consumers didn't want to pay for a political social network. But who would? Large political organizations and campaigns desperate for verified voters.
So he shifted his entire focus from B2C business to consumer to B2B, business to business.
Right.
The core technology and the verified voter database stayed somewhat similar, but the customer segment and the revenue model changed completely. He went from trying to charge citizens a few dollars to charging corporate campaigns a premium.
And when that still didn't create a fully sustainable engine, he didn't give up. He pivoted again.
Yes, he did.
He executed a zoom-in pivot. He took a single feature of the old product, just the tool used to contact voters, and zoomed in so that one specific feature became the entire focus of his new product.
And what I love about this concept is how it completely redefines a startup's lifespan.
What do you mean?
Well, we usually think of a startup's runway as a purely financial metric, right?
Yeah.
If you have $1 million in the bank and you burn 100 grand a month, you have 10 months of runway.
Right, just basic math.
But the lean methodology flips that perspective. It changes the math of survival. True runway isn't measured by months or dollars. It is measured by how many pivots the company has left before the money runs out.
Oh, wow.
If you can get through the build, measure, learn loop faster and cheaper by using scrappy MVPs and rigorous innovation accounting, you give yourself more opportunities to pivot.
You give yourself more at-bats to find that sustainable business model.
Exactly. Increasing the speed of the loop effectively extends your runway without you having to raise another dime of venture capital.
That is such an empowering way to look at it. But I have to ask, when you are executing these rapid pivots, moving at light speed through the build, measure, learn loop, things are inevitably going to break.
Oh, inevitable.
Systems crash, customers get angry, mistakes are made. How do you maintain this speed without the team just pointing fingers, or worse, firing the engineer who breaks the server during a fast pivot?
That is the hidden danger of moving fast, and the source material addresses it with a mechanism adapted from Toyo's manufacturing system. It's called the 5 Whys.
The 5 Whys.
Yeah. When a failure happens, human nature is to play the blame game or just slap a Band-Aid on the immediate symptom. The 5 Whys is a systemic solution to find the root cause of any problem so you can move fast without burning down your team.
Walk me through how that works in reality.
Okay, imagine a severe technical failure. You launch a new feature during a rapid iteration, the server crashes, and your website goes offline.
A nightmare scenario.
Right. The immediate symptom is technical, so a standard manager might just reboot the server, yell at the IT guy, and move on. But if you ask why 5 times, you trace that technical failure all the way back to a human managerial root cause.
So layer by layer.
Exactly. Layer 1. Why did the server crash? Because an obscure database subsystem was overloaded.
Okay, layer 2.
Layer 2. Why was it overloaded?
Yeah.
Because the engineer who wrote the new code didn't know how to use that subsystem properly.
Layer 3.
Layer 3. Why didn't they know how to use it? Because they were never trained on it.
Layer 4.
Layer 4. Why weren't they trained? Because their manager never implemented a training protocol for new hires.
And layer 5.
Layer 5. Why wasn't there a training protocol? Because the executive team was prioritizing launching new features over building sustainable internal processes.
Wow. So you go from a crashed piece of hardware all the way to a fundamentally flawed executive policy just by asking why 5 times.
It connects the technical symptom to the human system. It proves that behind every supposedly technical problem is a managerial problem waiting to be solved. So the provocative thought I want to leave you with today is this. I invite you to apply the 5 Whys to the very next obstacle or failure you face in your own life or work.
Just ask why 5 times.
Exactly. Don't settle for the surface level symptom. Dig deep to find the root cause.
It changes everything. You stop fixing symptoms and you start fixing systems. You know, it brings us right back to that Hollywood myth we talked about at the start.
It really does.
The startup journey isn't a magical linear rocket launch fueled by destiny and pizza. It's driving a car through the fog. It requires constant steering, rigorous empirical learning, and a willingness to ask the hard questions when you inevitably hit a pothole.
Perfectly said.
Whether you are building a tech empire, launching an internal corporate project, or just trying something new in your own life, extreme uncertainty is the reality. But now you have the blueprint to navigate it. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep steering, keep learning, and we will catch you next time.